My neighbor Dottie is 70 years old and has lived across the street from me for 11 years. She has never once knocked on my door before 6 in the morning. So when she grabbed my arm in the driveway last Tuesday, before I could load my bag into the truck, before I could say good morning, before I could do anything except stand there and stare at the expression on her face, I knew. Not what she was going to say, but that whatever it was going to change everything. She looked at me and said, "That man who keeps coming around while you travel. He is no delivery driver, Marcus. I have watched him for 3 months. Before we go further, I need to ask you something. Has someone ever tried to warn you about a person you trusted completely and you almost looked away? Drop a comment. Tell me yes or no. Because what Dottie said next made me wish I had listened sooner. Let me show you what I found. The morning everything changed, I was thinking about coffee. Not about Christine. Not about the 2 weeks I'd be gone. Not about the offshore platform waiting for me somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. Just coffee. The dark roast I hadn't had time to finish before loading my truck, still sitting on the kitchen counter getting cold while I hauled my duffel bag down the driveway. It was a Monday in October, 6:45 in the morning. Nashville was doing that thing it does in the fall where the air feels like it can't decide between summer and winter, cool enough to see your breath but warm enough that you don't need a jacket. The maple tree in our front yard had gone full red overnight, leaves dropping onto the lawn I'd mowed just last weekend. Green Hills was quiet at this hour, the kind of quiet that makes you think everything is fine. Dottie Marsh was standing at the edge of her driveway, 70 years old, barely 5'2", wearing her green gardening cardigan even though there was no gardening happening at 6:45 in the morning. Dottie had lived across the street from us for 11 years. She was the kind of neighbor who remembered your birthday, brought soup when you were sick, and noticed everything. And I mean everything. The woman had the situational awareness of a combat veteran, which was something I respected deeply. But she had never once walked over to stop me before a trip. I noticed her posture first, not the casual wave she usually gave. She was standing very still, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face before, somewhere between concern and determination. Like she'd been rehearsing what she wanted to say and was making sure she got it right. Marcus. She said my name quietly, glancing back at my house like she was checking the windows. Can I talk to you for a second? I set my duffel down on the driveway. Of course, Dottie. Everything okay? She stepped closer. That man who keeps coming around while you're away. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He's no delivery driver, Marcus. I've seen him 3 times in the last month alone. Same face every time, but a different uniform. Amazon 1 week, UPS the next. And he never once carries a real package to the door. He just walks right in. The October air suddenly felt colder than it had a minute ago. I kept my face neutral, old habit from 23 years in the Army. You learn fast that the first rule of gathering intelligence is to never show your hand before you have all the information. Are you sure it's the same man? I asked. Dottie gave me the look. The one that said she had been watching this street since before I owned a house on it. Marcus Webb, I have lived across from you for 11 years. I know every car, every face, every routine on this block. She pulled her cardigan tighter. He parks 2 streets over and walks. Always shows up about an hour after your taillights disappear around the corner. My hand was already in my pocket, already pulling out my phone. I opened the Ring Doorbell app, scrolled back through the motion alerts from the past 3 weeks. There were more than I expected. Timestamps at 9:45, 10:02, 9:58. Always late evening. Always on nights I was traveling. I tapped the clearest clip and zoomed in on the face. The footage was grainy in the low light, but clear enough. I knew that face. Tall, somewhere in his early 50s, silver hair swept back from a high forehead. The kind of man who looked comfortable in expensive clothes because he'd been wearing them his whole life. I had shaken that hand at the hospital fundraiser last spring. I had made small talk with that man while Christine laughed at something he said across the room. Dr. James Calloway, Chief of Cardiology at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, one of the most respected physicians in Nashville. A man who had apparently been visiting my home every time I boarded a plane. I stood there on my own driveway, holding my phone, watching a 12-second video clip loop on repeat. The maple leaves kept falling. Somewhere inside the house, I could hear Christine humming something soft and familiar, the sound drifting out through the kitchen window like nothing in the world was wrong. My duffel bag sat at my feet. My truck was running in the driveway, and everything I thought I knew about my life was already beginning to shift beneath me, slow and quiet, like the ground before an earthquake. I picked up my duffel bag and walked back inside. Christine was at the counter, pouring herself a second cup of coffee, still in her navy scrubs from the early shift she'd picked up this week. Her dark hair was pulled back the way she always wore it on work mornings. Practical, efficient, familiar. 12 years of mornings had burned that image into me so deep I could have drawn it from memory in a pitch-black room. She turned when she heard the door. "You forget something?" "Just saying goodbye properly," I said. I set my bag down by the stairs and sat at the kitchen table like I had nowhere to be. Tyler was already there, hunched over a bowl of cereal, scrolling through his phone with the focused disinterest of a 22-year-old who considered eye contact optional before 9 in the morning. I picked up the coffee mug Christine had already set out for me, took a slow sip, let the silence settle for a moment. "Hey," I said casually, setting the mug down. "Dottie stopped me outside. Said she's been seeing some delivery guy coming around the neighborhood who doesn't seem right to her. Different uniform every time, never actually drops anything off. You notice anything like that?" The change was small. Most people would have missed it entirely. Christine's hand paused for just under a second before she reached for the sugar. Tyler's spoon stopped moving in his bowl. Neither of them looked at each other, but something passed between them anyway, the way a current moves through water without disturbing the surface. Then Christine laughed softly. "You know how Dottie is. She notices everything and makes it twice as dramatic. She's probably talking about that guy from the new meal kit service. I signed up for a trial last month." She set her mug down and looked at me with those calm brown eyes I had trusted without question for over a decade. "Don't let her worry you before a trip, babe." Tyler finally looked up from his phone. "Yeah, Dad. Dottie called the cops on the Amazon guy twice last summer. Remember? Said he was casing the neighborhood. Turned out he was just slow at reading addresses." I nodded slowly, like I was considering it, like that explanation made perfect sense, and I was a reasonable man who was satisfied with reasonable answers. "You're probably right," I said. "I'll check in with her when I get back." The relief that moved through the kitchen was almost invisible. Christine's shoulders dropped just slightly. Tyler went back to his cereal. The moment passed, smooth and practiced, like a play they had run before. I finished my coffee, said my goodbyes the way I always did, kissed Christine on the cheek, told Tyler not to stay up until 3 in the morning playing video games. Christine walked me to the door, squeezed my hand, told me to text when I landed. "I will," I said. "Love you." Love you too, she said. I loaded my duffel into the truck and backed out of the driveway. Waved once at Christine standing in the doorway. Watched her smile and go back inside before I'd even reached the end of the block. Then I drove east. Not toward Nashville International. Not toward the interstate that would take me to the airport and the connecting flight to the Gulf. I drove east on Tootsie's Road, then cut over toward Nolensville Pike, heading toward East Nashville, where my younger brother Kevin lived in a 2-bedroom apartment near 5 Points. I didn't call ahead. Kevin was like that. Always had been. You showed up, he opened the door, no questions asked until you were ready to answer them. 38 years of being brothers had taught us that much about each other. I parked outside his building and sat in the truck for a moment with the engine running. I thought about Christine's hand pausing at the sugar bowl. I thought about Tyler's spoon going still. I thought about 12 years of believing that what I had built was real. Then I turned off the engine and went to find out how deep the damage actually went. Kevin opened the door on the second knock. He took one look at me standing in the hallway with my duffel bag, still dressed for a flight I hadn't taken, and stepped back to let me in without saying a word. That was Kevin. 38 years of being my brother had taught him that some moments required silence before they required conversation. His apartment was small and practical. A couch, a coffee table, a kitchen that saw more takeout containers than actual cooking. A framed photo of us with our parents on the wall by the door, both of us in uniform. Our mother beaming between us like she'd won something. Kevin had done 6 years in the Army before a knee injury ended his service. He understood certain things without needing them explained. I sat down on his couch and told him everything. Dottie's warning, the doorbell footage, Calloway's face on that 12-second clip, the way Christine's hand had paused at the sugar bowl, the way Tyler's spoon had gone still. I laid it out the way I used to brief my commanding officer. Facts first, observations second, conclusions held until the evidence supported them. Kevin listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" That was the right question. Not "are you sure?" Not "maybe there's an explanation." Not "let's not jump to conclusions." Just, "What do you need?" I had married the wrong person and somehow ended up with the right brother. I need to know what's actually happening in my house when I'm not there, I said. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Christine worked Tuesday and Thursday afternoon shifts at the hospital, 3 to 11. That gave us a window. I called a security installation company I found with a quick search, a small operation downtown called Shield and Stone, the kind of place that specialized in discreet residential surveillance and asked no unnecessary questions. They had availability that same afternoon. At 2:15, while Christine was 40 minutes into her shift and Tyler's car was nowhere in the driveway, I let myself back into my own home with my own key and stood in the entryway for a moment, listening to the silence. The house smelled like Christine's lavender candles and the cedar diffuser she kept in the living room. 12 years of familiar smell. I moved through it like a stranger. The technician, a quiet man named Paul who worked with the efficient focus of someone who had done this many times before, walked each room with me and identified placement. Living room covering the front door and main seating area. Kitchen angled toward the table and the counter. Upstairs hallway, motion activated. Master bedroom, built into the frame of the ceiling fan, completely invisible unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Paul worked clean and fast. No small talk, no curious glances, no commentary on why a man might need hidden cameras in his own bedroom. Just professional work, efficiently executed. The whole installation took under 2 hours. At 4:45, I locked the front door behind me and drove back to Kevin's apartment. We ordered pizza, watched half a football game neither of us was actually watching. At 11 o'clock, Kevin went to bed, and I sat alone on his couch in the dark. The apartment quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of traffic from the street below. I opened the app. 4 feeds appeared on my screen, each one a different angle of the home I had built over 12 years. Crystal clear, even in low light. The living room, empty and still. The kitchen, clean and undisturbed. The upstairs hallway, dark except for the nightlight Christine kept plugged in near the bathroom. The master bedroom, the bed neatly made the way she always left it. Everything looked exactly the way it always looked when I was away. I sat there for a long time, watching 4 quiet rooms on a 6-inch screen, telling myself that maybe Dottie had been wrong, that maybe the footage had been misleading, that maybe the explanation was simple, and I was sitting in my brother's apartment at 11 o'clock at night for nothing. Then Tyler's bedroom light clicked off, and 20 minutes later, his car backed out of the driveway. And I watched him go on the hallway camera, pausing at the top of the stairs, pulling out his phone, typing something quickly before he headed down. Not a long message, just a few words. The kind you send when you want someone to know the coast is clear. The notification came at 9:47. A single vibration against the coffee table where I'd set my phone face down, telling myself I needed to stop staring at it. I had been sitting on Kevin's couch for almost 2 hours by then, somewhere between awake and exhausted, watching a home renovation show I couldn't have described 30 seconds after any given scene. I picked up the phone. Motion detected. Front door, camera 1. My thumb hovered over the screen for just a moment. 23 years in the Army. 2 tours in places that don't make the evening news anymore. I had been in situations where the difference between a good outcome and a catastrophic one came down to a single decision made in a single second. I had learned to breathe through those moments, to slow everything down and see clearly before acting. I tapped the notification. The live feed opened on camera 1. Tyler had left 40 minutes earlier. The driveway had been empty since then, just the amber glow of the streetlight catching the edge of Christine's Honda in the carport. Now there was another vehicle parked at the curb, dark gray, late model, the kind of understated luxury that announces money without shouting about it. A man was walking up our front path. No uniform this time. He was wearing a charcoal suit. The jacket fitted perfectly across broad shoulders. A white dress shirt open at the collar. Silver hair swept back. Posture easy and unhurried. The walk of a man who had never once in his life felt like he didn't belong somewhere. He was carrying a bottle of wine in one hand. In the other, a small bouquet of deep red flowers that caught the porch light as he reached the door. He didn't knock. He rang the bell once, the way you ring the bell of someone who is expecting you, and the door opened almost immediately. Christine was wearing a dress I had never seen before. Dark green, fitted at the waist, her hair down around her shoulders the way she almost never wore it on a weekday evening. She looked beautiful. She looked like a woman who had spent time getting ready for someone. She smiled when she saw him, and it was not the smile I knew. I had seen Christine smile 10,000 times across 12 years of marriage. I knew her polite smile and her tired smile and her genuine smile and the small private one she saved for moments that caught her off guard. This was none of those. This was open and unguarded and lit from somewhere deep, the kind of smile you only show someone when you have stopped pretending entirely. She stepped back to let him in. My finger moved to the audio icon before I had consciously decided to tap it. The sound came through clearly, even with the distance and the ambient noise of the street. Christine's voice first, warm and relaxed. Then his, lower, unhurried, the practiced ease of a man completely comfortable in a space that did not belong to him. Then Christine said something that stopped my breathing entirely. He is somewhere over the gulf by now. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. We have the whole night, James. James. Not Dr. Calloway. Not the distinguished cardiologist from the hospital fundraiser. James. The name you use when someone has moved past every professional boundary and into the part of your life you keep hidden from the person who shares your bed. I set the phone down on the coffee table. I did not throw it. Did not stand up, did not pace, did not do any of the things a man is supposed to do when the ground opens up beneath him. I just set it down very carefully, face up, the live feed still running. Christine's living room lit warm and gold on the small screen. I had survived Fallujah. I had survived Kandahar. I had carried men out of situations that should have killed all of us and somehow walked away standing. But I sat in my brother's apartment at 9:47 on a Monday night in October and understood, with the particular clarity that only comes when something is completely and irreversibly true, that the hardest thing I had ever survived was happening right now, 15 miles away, in my own home, in rooms I had paid for, in a life I had built from nothing and believed in completely. And the woman at the center of it had not even waited for my plane to reach cruising altitude. I didn't sleep. I sat on Kevin's couch until the live feed showed Calloway's car pulling away from the curb at 6:12 in the morning, and then I sat there a while longer, watching the empty street in the gray early light. Christine's Honda was still in the carport. The porch light had been left on all night. Everything looked exactly the way it always looked when I was away on a trip. That was the part that stayed with me. How normal it looked. How practiced. When Kevin came out at 7, he took one look at my face and started the coffee without saying anything. I pulled up the footage on my phone and played him the relevant clips. The arrival, the dress, the audio. He watched in silence, jaw tight, hands wrapped around his mug. When it was over, he set the mug down very carefully on the counter. "I'm sorry, Marcus," he said. That's all he said, and it was enough. I spent the next hour going back through every notification the app had logged. Not just from last night, but from the past 3 weeks. The full window the cameras covered before installation. The pattern became clear quickly, the way patterns always do once you know what you're looking for. Tyler left the house between 9 and 9:30 on 8 separate evenings. Calloway arrived between 9:40 and 10:15 on the same 8 evenings. Tyler returned after midnight each time, usually within 30 minutes of Calloway's departure. The overlap was too precise to be coincidence. Someone was coordinating the schedule. I thought about all the times Tyler had asked me what time my flight was. Casual, offhand, the way you ask about something that doesn't really matter. "Hey, Dad, what time do you leave Thursday? Early flight or late?" I had always answered without thinking. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. He lived in my house. It was a natural question. It wasn't a natural question. I needed someone who could go further than footage. Someone who could pull phone records, verify financial connections, build a case that would hold weight somewhere beyond my own certainty. Kevin knew a man. Former Nashville Metro detective turned private investigator, operated out of a small office on 2nd Avenue downtown. His name was Ray Donovan, and Kevin said he was the kind of man who found things people had worked very hard to keep hidden. I called at 8:30. Ray picked up on the 3rd ring and said he had an opening at 10. His office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who had spent 20 years finding uncomfortable truths. Functional furniture, organized files, no decorative pretense. He had the kind of stillness that comes from years of watching people carefully. The ability to sit without fidgeting and listen without rushing toward conclusions. I laid out everything I had. The doorbell footage, the camera recordings, the pattern of Tyler's departures, the audio from the night before. Ray watched the clips, made notes, asked 3 questions, each one precise, no wasted words. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. I can have preliminary phone record analysis by tomorrow morning. If the boy has been texting her your flight information every time you travel, the timestamps will show it. He paused. And if there's money moving between the doctor and anyone in your household, I'll find that too. I authorized everything he needed and transferred his retainer before I stood up from the chair. The call came the following morning at 8:45. Marcus. Ray's voice was measured, professional. I have the phone records. He cleared his throat. Your son has sent a text message to your wife's number within 30 minutes of every single one of your flight check-ins for the past 14 months. The timestamps match perfectly. He knows your travel schedule and he's been passing it along consistently. 14 months. I stood at Kevin's kitchen window, looking out at the quiet East Nashville street below, and did the math without wanting to. 14 months of trips. 14 months of Tyler watching me pack my bag and load my truck and back out of the driveway, then pulling out his phone before my taillights had cleared the end of the block. There's something else, Ray said. His tone shifted in a way that made my hand tighten around the phone, something you need to hear in person. Can you come back to the office this afternoon? Ray's office felt smaller the second time, or maybe I just felt larger in it. Too aware of my own presence, too conscious of the space my body was taking up, while the rest of me was somewhere else entirely. I sat in the same chair as the day before and watched Ray open a manila folder on the desk between us, with the careful deliberateness of a man who understood that what was inside it was going to hurt. He turned it toward me. The top page was a copy of a life insurance policy document. Northwestern Mutual. My name in the insured field, the way it had been since Christine and I had taken out the policy 8 years ago when we finally got serious about planning for the future. I recognized the policy number. I had filed it in our home office, in the second drawer of the filing cabinet Christine had picked out, in a folder labeled simply Household Documents. The beneficiary field had been changed. 4 months ago, according to the amendment date stamped in the upper right corner, someone had submitted a change of beneficiary request through the online policyholder portal. The primary beneficiary was no longer Christine Webb. It was an entity I had never heard of. Callaway Webb Holdings, LLC. Registered in the state of Tennessee. Listed address, a post office box in Brentwood. $800,000. That was the policy value. $800,000, redirected to a company I did not own, did not know existed, and had never authorized. A company whose name contained my own. I looked up at Ray. He had the expression of a man who had delivered bad news enough times to know that silence was more useful than commentary. He let me sit with it for a moment before he turned to the next page. The LLC was registered 3 years ago, he said quietly. 2 members listed on the formation documents, James Callaway and Christine Webb. He paused. Your wife is a co-owner of a limited liability company with the man who has been entering your home. The company has no public business activity, no website, no employees, no filings beyond the initial registration, and a single bank account. What's in the account? I asked. My voice came out level. I was grateful for that. Ray turned to the 3rd page, Over the past 18 months, $47,000 has been transferred from your joint checking account into the LLC's operating account. The transfers were made in amounts small enough to avoid automatic flagging, between $800 and $1,500 each time, spaced out irregularly. He looked at me directly. It was designed to look like routine household expenses. I sat back in the chair. $47,000. Moved carefully, methodically, in amounts calibrated to stay beneath the threshold that would trigger a second look. The kind of financial architecture that requires planning, patience, a specific kind of coldness. This was not a woman who had fallen into something she hadn't intended. This was not a marriage that had quietly come apart at the seams while two people drifted in different directions. This was construction. Deliberate, detailed, executed over years with the same careful attention that you would bring to any long-term project. She had been building something while I was away, building it with his name attached to mine, using money I had earned on platforms in the Gulf, in the kind of work that leaves calluses on your hands and salt in your hair, and takes you away from home more than you ever wanted. I had a question I already knew the answer to. How long has Calloway been coming to the house? I asked. Ray closed the folder. Based on what I can piece together from the LLC formation date and the financial records, he said carefully, at least 3 years, possibly longer. But Marcus, he stopped. There is one more thing. He reached into a second folder and set a single printed page on the desk. I need you to look at this before we talk about next steps. It was a screenshot of an email thread. The sender address was one I didn't recognize. The recipient was Christine's personal email. The date at the top of the chain was from the spring of 2009, 13 years ago. 1 year before Christine and I had met. A veteran knows one thing above everything else. You do not advance until you have sufficient firepower. You do not move on an objective when you are still gathering intelligence. You do not let emotion dictate timing. Emotion is the enemy of strategy, and strategy is the only thing standing between you and an outcome you cannot recover from. I had the evidence. Now I needed the weapons. Sandra Pierce ran a family law practice out of a corner office on Church Street in downtown Nashville, 14th floor, windows looking out over the Cumberland River. Kevin had found her name through a colleague who described her in 3 words. Thorough, relentless, wins. I called at 8 in the morning, and her assistant scheduled me for 10. Sandra was 55, silver-haired, with the kind of focused attention that made you feel like you were the only case she had ever taken. She watched my compiled footage in silence, read Ray's financial report without expression, reviewed the LLC documents and the insurance amendment with the careful precision of someone cataloging ammunition. When she finished, she set everything down and looked at me across her desk. "This is not a straightforward divorce filing," she said. "What you have here goes beyond adultery and asset dissipation. The insurance beneficiary change, executed without your knowledge or consent, combined with the systematic transfer of marital funds into a jointly held entity, that is financial fraud. We are looking at criminal exposure for both your wife and Dr. Calloway." She paused. I want to be clear about what that means. We are not just ending a marriage. We are potentially ending careers and triggering criminal prosecution. I told her to proceed. She laid out the immediate steps with the efficiency of a general briefing a campaign. First, asset protection. Before any filing, before any confrontation, before anything that might alert Christine to what was coming, I needed to move. That afternoon, I sat across from my financial advisor at First Tennessee Bank, and authorized a series of transfers that took 2 hours to execute. My personal savings, consolidated. My retirement accounts, updated with new beneficiary designations. The joint checking account, reduced to a balance that met the legal threshold for divorce proceedings without triggering claims of financial misconduct. It was the most cold-blooded afternoon of my life, and I moved through it with a steadiness that surprised even me. From the bank, I called Tyler's credit card provider. The supplementary card I had been paying for 2 years, the one Tyler used for gas and groceries and whatever else a 22-year-old with no income found necessary, was canceled effective immediately. I thought about what his face would look like the next time he reached for his wallet. I thought about it for approximately 4 seconds before I moved on. Sandra called at 5 to confirm the paperwork timeline. We would be ready to file by end of week. She had coordinated with Ray, who was completing his final investigation report. She had also contacted the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance regarding the unauthorized beneficiary change. That process, she explained, had its own momentum now, separate from the divorce proceedings. Everything was moving. Everything was in place. I drove back to Kevin's apartment as the Nashville sky went dark and orange over the river. Kevin had made dinner, actual food this time, pasta and garlic bread, the kind of meal you make when you want to do something useful for someone, and cooking is all you have. We ate without talking much. The silence between us was the comfortable kind, the kind built over decades. After dinner, I sat on the couch and checked my phone. There was a text from Tyler, sent at 7:42 in the evening, while I was driving back from Sandra's office. "Hey, Dad, when are you coming home? Mom said your project is running long. We miss you. We miss you." I read it twice. Set the phone face down on the coffee table. Picked it up again and read it a third time, looking for something in those 4 words that might complicate what I already knew. Some note of genuine feeling, some thread of the boy I had raised, some reason to hesitate. I set it down again, did not reply, turned off the screen. Some debts cannot be negotiated. They can only be settled. Ray called at 11:14. I was still awake. I had not expected to be anything else. Marcus. His voice had a quality I hadn't heard from him before, careful in a way that went beyond professional. The way a doctor sounds when the test results are worse than anticipated, and they are deciding how much to say at once. "I need you to listen to what I found in those emails. All of it, start to finish, before you say anything." I sat up on Kevin's couch and said, "Go ahead." The email chain Ray had photographed at our last meeting began in April of 2009. Christine had been 28 years old. Calloway had been 32, already 2 years into his cardiology residency at Vanderbilt. They had met at a hospital fundraiser, the same kind of event where I had shaken his hand 17 years later, not knowing I was meeting a man who had known my wife before I did. The early emails were what you would expect. 2 people finding each other, the particular energy of that, the way language becomes charged when 2 people are deciding whether to cross a line. Ray read me selected passages in a flat, professional tone that I was grateful for. I did not need inflection to understand what I was hearing. They had been together, in whatever form that took, for approximately 1 year before Calloway accepted a fellowship position in Boston in the spring of 2010. The distance, the demands of his career, the particular calculus of 2 ambitious people who wanted different things at the same time. The relationship had paused. Not ended, Ray was careful to say. Paused. I had met Christine in the fall of 2010. She had been at a mutual friend's dinner party in Germantown. I had just come back from my second tour, still adjusting to the particular strangeness of civilian life, still learning how to be in a room without cataloging the exits. She had been warm and funny and completely at ease in a way that I found extraordinary after 18 months in places where ease was a liability. We had talked for 3 hours. I had called her the next day. Ray's voice continued, steady and even. The email chain resumed in 2012, 2 years into my marriage to Christine. Calloway had returned to Nashville to take a position at Vanderbilt Medical Center. The tone of the emails shifted. Less searching, more settled. 2 people who had found their arrangement and were comfortable inside it. There was an email from Christine dated 6 weeks after our wedding. Ray read it to me. She had written that I was a good man, steady, reliable, generous, that she had not planned for things to happen the way they had, but that the timing had worked out better than expected. That Calloway's return to Nashville had been something she had been hoping for without allowing herself to hope for it too directly. That she was happy with the arrangement as it stood. The arrangement. I sat with that word for a moment. Then Ray told me about Tyler. Calloway had paid Tyler's first year of college tuition, $18,000, transferred directly to the university bursar's office in August of 2019, listed in the payment records as an anonymous donor contribution to a student account. Tyler had been 18 years old. Christine had told him the truth that summer, before he left for school. About Calloway. About the history. About the arrangement. Tyler had been 22 years old when I packed my bag for the Gulf last month. When he asked me what time my flight was. When he typed those few words into his phone and sent them to his mother before my truck had cleared the end of the block. He had known for 4 years. I did not say anything for a long time after Ray finished. The apartment was completely silent. Kevin's bedroom door was closed. The street outside was empty. The refrigerator hummed its low, indifferent note. 12 years, I said finally. Yes, Ray said. She chose me because I was useful. Ray didn't answer that. There was nothing to answer. I set the phone down on the cushion beside me and looked at the far wall of Kevin's living room, at the framed photograph of the 2 of us in uniform, our mother standing between us, beaming. I had been 24 years old in that photo. I had believed, with the uncomplicated certainty of a young man who had not yet been asked to doubt the things he trusted most, that the life waiting for me on the other side of my service was going to be built on something real. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I picked the phone back up and sent Sandra Pierce a single text message. We're ready. Let's finish this. I drove to Green Hills on Thursday morning. Not to go inside, not to confront anyone, not to collect anything, not to give Christine or Tyler any indication that the week they thought they had managed so carefully was about to come to a very specific end. I drove there because I needed to see it, because there is a difference between knowing something and standing in front of it, and I had spent enough years in the Army to understand that you do not walk into a final operation without first confirming the terrain with your own eyes. I parked 2 blocks east on Trentwood Drive and cut the engine. From where I sat, I could see the corner of our roof above the tree line. The maple in the front yard had dropped more leaves overnight, the lawn covered in red now, the kind of color that under any other circumstances I would have found beautiful. Christine's Honda was in the carport. Tyler's car was in the driveway. A normal Thursday morning on a normal residential street in a neighborhood where nothing bad was supposed to happen. I had bought that house in the spring of 2012. We had driven through Green Hills on a Saturday afternoon, Christine and I, not seriously looking yet, just getting a sense of the market the way you do when you are newly married, and the future still feels like something you are designing together. The realtor had opened the front door, and Christine had walked into the living room and stopped. She had turned to me with an expression I had not seen on her face before, something unguarded and immediate, and said, "This is it, Marcus. This is our house." I had believed her completely. I had signed the papers 3 weeks later. Now I sat 2 blocks away and looked at the roofline and tried to locate whatever it was I was supposed to feel. Grief, maybe. Loss. The particular weight of 12 years folding closed. But what I found, sitting there with the engine off and the October morning going quietly about its business around me, was something closer to clarity. The clean, uncomplicated feeling of a man who has finally stopped carrying something that was never his to carry. My phone buzzed. Sandra. I picked up on the first ring. "Tomorrow at 5, she confirmed. "I'll meet you at the corner of Trentwood and Granny White Pike at 4:45. The process server will be with me. Ray's full investigation report has been filed with the court. The insurance fraud documentation has been forwarded to the Tennessee Department of Commerce." She paused. "Marcus, I want you to be prepared. When we walk in there, it will move quickly. Have you thought about what you want to say?" I had thought about very little else for 4 days. "I know what I want to say," I told her. "Good." She was quiet for a moment. And Marcus, for what it's worth, in 22 years of family law, I have rarely seen a case documented this thoroughly or handled this carefully. "You gave us everything we needed to make this unassailable. Whatever happens in that room tomorrow, they will not be able to dispute a single thing." I thanked her and ended the call. I sat for another few minutes looking at the maple tree 2 blocks away, the red leaves catching the morning light. I thought about the man who had planted a life in that house with both hands, who had left every few weeks to go earn the money that paid for it, who had kissed his wife goodbye at the door and driven to the airport, and never once thought to question what happened after his taillights cleared the corner. That man had done nothing wrong. He had simply trusted the wrong people for a very long time. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, did not look back. Tomorrow at 5, it would be over. They were watching television when we walked in. I used my key, the same key I had carried on the same ring for 12 years, the one with the small scratch on the bow from the time I had dropped it on the concrete floor of the garage and kicked it accidentally across the room. I had never replaced it, never had a reason to. Christine was on the couch with a glass of wine. Tyler was in the armchair to her left, phone in hand, the television casting its blue light across both of their faces. A Friday evening at home. Comfortable, ordinary, completely unaware. The door opening made Christine look up. For one unguarded second, before her mind caught up with what her eyes were seeing, her expression was completely open. Then she registered me, then Sandra beside me, then the man in the gray jacket behind Sandra, who was carrying a leather document portfolio and had the particular posture of someone who delivered official papers for a living. The wine glass lowered slowly to her knee. "Marcus," her voice was careful. "You're home early." "I'm not staying," I said. Tyler looked up from his phone. His eyes moved from me to Sandra to the process server and back to me, and I watched him understand, in the space of about 3 seconds, exactly what was happening. He set his phone face down on the armrest, did not speak. Sandra stepped forward. "Mrs. Webb, my name is Sandra Pierce. I'm an attorney representing your husband." She nodded to the process server, who opened his portfolio and removed 2 sets of documents. He placed the first set on the coffee table in front of Christine with the practiced efficiency of a man who had done this hundreds of times. "You are being served with a petition for dissolution of marriage on grounds of adultery, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud." There is also a referral to the district attorney's office regarding the unauthorized modification of a life insurance beneficiary and the systematic transfer of marital assets into a fraudulently established entity. Christine stared at the papers. Her hand had gone very still on her wine glass. The second set went on the armrest beside Tyler's phone. "Mr. Webb." The process server's voice was even, impersonal. "You are being served with documentation of civil conspiracy and financial complicity. A separate referral has been made to the university regarding your role in the coordinated concealment of the activities described herein." Tyler looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. "Dad." His voice came out younger than his 22 years, stripped of whatever performance he had been maintaining for the past 14 months. He stopped, started again. "I didn't know it would go this far." I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball in the backyard of that house, who had fallen asleep on my shoulder on long car trips, who had called me from his first week of college just to talk, the way kids do when they are homesick, but too proud to say so directly. I looked at him for a long moment. "You knew enough," I said. "You made a choice. Every month for 14 months, you made the same choice." He didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one. Christine was crying quietly, tears moving down her face without drama, the way people cry when they are too tired to perform grief. "Marcus," she said, "please, we can talk about this. After everything we built together." I thought about the email Ray had read to me 2 nights ago, the one she had written 6 weeks after our wedding, calm and deliberate, describing our marriage as an arrangement that had worked out better than expected. "We didn't build anything together, Christine," I said. "You built something. I just paid for it." I looked at her one last time. 12 years of mornings, 12 years of goodbyes at the door, 12 years of believing that the life I was working so hard to provide was the life I actually had. "I survived Fallujah," I said quietly. "I survived Kandahar. I carried men out of places that should have killed all of us." She held my gaze, tears still falling, and I felt nothing except the clean, final certainty of a man who is done. "I'll survive this one too." I turned and walked to the door. The October night outside was cool and clear, the kind of Nashville evening that smells like wood smoke and fallen leaves and the particular freshness that comes after a season changes. I stood on the porch for just a moment, breathing it in. Then I walked to my truck and drove away from Green Hills for the last time. 3 months is not a long time. It is long enough for leaves to fall and bare branches to appear, and the first cold fronts of winter to move through Nashville like a reminder that the world keeps its own schedule regardless of what is happening in any particular life. It is long enough for paperwork to move through courts and licensing boards and insurance departments. Long enough for consequences to find the people they belong to. It is not long enough to stop reaching for your phone to show someone something funny, then remembering there is no one there to show. I had moved into the apartment at the Gulch in early November. 9th floor, 2 bedrooms, a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Nashville skyline and the Cumberland River bending south in the distance. It was smaller than the Green Hills house by about half. It smelled like fresh paint and someone else's cleaning products, and the particular neutrality of a space that had not yet taken on any personality. I liked that about it. The blankness. The absence of 12 years of accumulated meaning in every corner. The house had sold in 6 weeks. The Nashville market moved fast, and Green Hills moved faster. The proceeds, after the court-ordered division, left me financially stable in a way that felt almost abstract given everything else. 70% of the marital assets, the retirement accounts updated, the insurance policy restored to its original beneficiary structure. and referred to the DA's office for prosecution. Sandra had delivered on everything she had promised. Calloway's medical license had been suspended by the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners pending investigation into the financial fraud and the ethical violations documented in Ray's report. Vanderbilt had placed him on administrative leave the same week. The man who had walked into my home in an expensive suit, carrying wine and flowers, comfortable and unhurried, like a man who had never once considered that anything could touch him, was currently consulting with a criminal defense attorney in a rented office in Brentwood. Tyler had been ordered to complete 180 hours of community service and placed on 12 months of probation for civil conspiracy. He had called me 4 times since the court date. I had not answered. I did not know yet whether I ever would. That was a question that belonged to a later version of me, one who had more distance from the specific weight of a son typing his father's flight information into a text message and pressing send. Christine had moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Antioch. She had found work as an administrative coordinator at a medical practice across town, the kind of position that required a different name tag and a different parking lot, and none of the social standing that 12 years of being a doctor's social companion and an engineer's wife had provided. I did not track her movements. Ray had given me everything I needed, and I had stopped needing more. On the first Thursday of December, I made coffee in my new kitchen for the first time. I had been using the coffee shop downstairs since moving in, the kind of proximity convenience that a man living alone defaults to without thinking about it. But that morning, I had bought a bag of dark roast from the market on the ground floor and found the coffee maker still in its box on the kitchen counter, where I had set it weeks ago and never opened. I made a full pot, poured a cup, stood at the window. The Nashville skyline caught the early light the way it does in December, low and golden, the kind of morning that makes the city look like a place where things begin rather than end. The river moved south, steady and unhurried, the same way it always had. I stood there for a long time, both hands around the mug, not thinking about anything in particular. The knock at the door came at 9:15. Dottie was standing in the hallway in her green cardigan, holding a covered dish with both hands. "Apple pie," she said, before I could say anything. "Made it yesterday. I got your new address from Kevin." She looked up at me with those sharp, clear eyes. "You going to let me in, or are we doing this in the hallway?" I opened the door wider. She walked in, set the pie on my kitchen counter, looked around the apartment with the frank assessment of a woman who had been observing the details of other people's lives for 7 decades. Then she turned to me and said simply, "Good to see you standing straight again, soldier." I didn't have words for that, so I got out 2 plates instead. We ate that pie at my kitchen counter, Dottie and I, looking out at the Nashville skyline while the December morning did its quiet work outside the window. She didn't ask me to talk about any of it, didn't offer opinions or judgments or the kind of well-meaning advice that people give when they want to feel useful in the face of something they cannot fix. She just sat there eating apple pie at 9:30 in the morning, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and somehow that was exactly right. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from having been surrounded by people who were never really there. I had lived inside that loneliness for 12 years without knowing it had a name. I had mistaken its absence for contentment, its silence for peace. It is only when you step outside of something that you can see its true shape. I had built a life the way I built everything, carefully, methodically, with attention to load-bearing structures and long-term integrity. I had trusted the foundation because I had laid it myself, with my own hands, with the full faith of a man who believed that effort and honesty were enough to make something last. What I had not accounted for was that a foundation can be compromised from beneath, slowly and deliberately, by people who understood exactly how much weight it was carrying and chose to exploit that rather than honor it. That is not a failure of character. It is a failure of information. The lesson I carried out of Green Hills was not that trust is foolish. Trust is not foolish. It is necessary. It is the thing that makes a life with other people possible at all. But trust without attention is not virtue. It is vulnerability dressed up as loyalty. The people who love you will not need you to look away. They will not require your absence as a condition of their happiness. Pay attention. Not with suspicion, not with the exhausting vigilance of a man who trusts no one, but with the simple, clear-eyed awareness of someone who understands that love is demonstrated in patterns, not just words. Watch how people behave when they think you are not watching. Listen to what is said in the spaces between the things that are said directly. Notice when the relief on someone's face tells a different story than the words coming out of their mouth. I had been a soldier for 23 years. I had been trained to read terrain, to identify threats, to act on incomplete information with decisive clarity. And I had walked into my own home every day for 12 years and turned all of that off at the door. Not anymore. Dottie finished her pie and rinsed her plate in my sink with the unself-conscious ease of someone who had decided we were already friends. At the door, she paused and looked back at me. "You know what the hardest part of starting over is?" she asked. I shook my head, realizing you're not starting over at all. She smiled, small and certain. "You're just starting. Everything before was practice." She left. I stood at the window with my coffee going cold in my hands, looking out at the river, at the city, at the particular brightness of a December morning that had decided, without consulting anyone, to be beautiful anyway. If this story reached you in some way, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to be reminded that paying attention is not the same as losing faith, share this with them. Subscribe so you never miss a story. I read every single comment, and your perspective matters more than you know. There is a version of Marcus Webb who never checked that doorbell camera, who smiled at his neighbor, loaded his truck, and drove to the airport the way he had driven there 100 times before, who spent another year, maybe 5, maybe 10, building a life that was never entirely his own. That man is not a fool. He is simply someone who loved deeply and believed the best of the people closest to him. There is no shame in that. The shame belongs entirely to those who looked at that love and chose to exploit it. But God places honest people in our lives for a reason. He puts a Dottie at the edge of every driveway, a quiet voice of truth that arrives before the damage becomes irreparable. The question is never whether the signs are there. The question is whether we are willing to stop and look. Marcus walked away from Green Hills with nothing he had expected to keep. But he walked away with everything that actually mattered. His clarity, his dignity, the unshakable knowledge that he had faced the hardest thing life had handed him and had not broken beneath it. God does not promise that the people we love will deserve that love. He promises that we will find our way through when they do not. And sometimes, on a quiet winter morning with good coffee and an honest friend and a city spread out bright below your window, that is more than enough to begin.